Hello, everyone, and I am joined today by Rachel Cook. And I'm just going to read Rachel's bio. Rachel Cook is the founder of The Kinder Way. She's a brand strategist, consumer intelligence expert, and data storyteller who brings decades of experience in the corporate sector to accelerate the growth of the vegan and plant-based industries. Rachel has held leadership roles at a well-established Fortune 100 retailer, a restaurant-focused market research supplier, a successful retail design firm, and several big-name advertising agencies. Her experience spans the food, fashion, and beauty sectors. Her data-driven, forward-thinking strategies have delivered strong outcomes for the organizations she's worked with, including growing the global sales of a multinational apparel and home fashion value retailer by $10 billion. And Rachel has recently become a regular guest contributor on Vegconomist, the vegan business magazine, and she's working on her first book. Rachel, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Katrina. It's so lovely to be with you and all your listeners. Thank you for having me.
No, it's a pleasure. I'm really looking forward to diving into your expertise, and it's so brilliant that you're now in the vegan and plant-based space. So my first question is always about the why. So you've got these decades of experience in the corporate sector, in consumer intelligence, brand strategy. Tell us about your why, and now you're branching out on your own. You're launching your own consultancy business, The Kinder Way. Tell us why you're making that shift.
Well, you kind of warned me about this. This is the kind of thing I could talk about all day, Katrina, right? It's like, that joke about, how do you know when you've met a vegan? Because they'll tell you. So seriously, try to hold to be bold, be brief, and be gone. So I'm going to share three points that led me. You like that one?
I do. Yeah. That's very cool.
That's a good one. And so I'm going to talk about 3 points in particular that led me on my journey to The Kinder Way. So the first one is really going back to when I was actually 2 years old, and my mother recounts of how she used to push me around in the shopping cart at the grocery store, and how when we would get to the meat department, I actually would stop and point at all the meat and say dead animal bodies, which obviously was sort of shocking to all the other shoppers. But it was amazing that I had at least some kind of consciousness at that time of what I was eating, and that that meat was animals. And then unfortunately, meat was sort of normalized in my household, so that, until I was in my 30s, I was eating meat and dairy. And starting in my 30s, I really found vegetarianism for the first time and started embracing that. But my next, the second point on my journey was sort of a fast forward to 2018. And what happened then was I had been mainly vegetarian for so many years. And I decided that I wanted to find some new vegetarian friends around the Boston area where I live. So I look up the meetup groups around the Boston area, and I find this one that says, if you want to actually be part of our group, you need to watch a particular film. And I don't know if you've seen it. Have you seen the film Diet for a New America?
I've heard of it. I haven't watched it yet. Yeah. I know it though. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's this hour-long film. It's super dated. It's only an hour long, but it's that John Robbins story. So he's the one who gave up the Baskin Robbins empire because of the horrors of the dairy industry. And it's, like I said, it's dated and all of that, but it was so well before its time in terms of exposing the horrors of factory farming and the climate crisis and all the rest. But in 1 hour, I felt like I had this huge awakening. My eyes were opened and I was basically vegan overnight. And then I was, devouring everything I could find. I was watching all the documentaries, and I was, reading all the books. And then I decided to learn as much as I could about health and nutrition on a plant-based diet. And then I ended up at Victoria Moran's Main Street Vegan Academy last summer. And she's just been a wonderful mentor to me. So I know you know Victoria.
Yeah, she's lovely. We're good friends. Yeah. Amazing person.
Yeah, so that's been wonderful. And so then the third part of my why is really about what the push was to actually start this business. And so, I guess a lot of us had those moments in life where we've asked ourselves if their work and their life were aligned. And actually, a friend just introduced me to a quote that I thought was kind of interesting to share with your listeners if they haven't heard it before. It's from someone named Lawrence Purcell Jacks. And he writes, the master in the art of living draws no sharp distinction between his work and his play, his labor and his leisure, his mind and his body, his education and his recreation. He hardly knows which is which. He simply pursues his vision of excellence through whatever it is he's doing and leaves others to determine whether he's working or playing. To himself, he always appears to be doing both. And to me, that was it. I was like,
Nice.
I knew that to live a more authentic vegan life, I had already created a vegan household. My kids became vegan. My dog became vegan. I was volunteering for all these organizations I cared about. I was sort of resurrecting my love of singing and dancing and a lot of other things that were important to me. But I realized that I needed to consider how the work played into all of these other parts of my life. And, starting when I was basically out of college, I was already asking myself, what makes people tick? So I already had this innate curiosity about people. And that had led me into this career around market research and brand strategy. But now I realized that I could apply all of those years, all of those gifts of unearthing insights and actioning those insights to organizations to be working with brands and companies that were fully aligned with my own. And those were vegan and plant-based companies.
Nice.
And to me, the Kinder Way is informing and growing their businesses enough that they are leading more customers down the Kinder Way. And I think that's what we all want. We all want a more vegan world.
Brilliant. I love that. And I think it's such perfect timing as well. You've spent all these years, decades doing that kind of work, and the timing is just perfect now, just literally, particularly over the past couple of years and now, because this sector is growing so much and, we need your kind of expertise. So I love that. Let's dive a little bit deeper into exactly what you do. So tell me, what is data storytelling?
Okay, well, it's funny, when I was thinking about this kind of question, I was thinking about Brene Brown, who many of your listeners might know. She's somebody I would call a data storyteller, because what she is at heart is she's an academic, right? She's somebody who has spent many years conducting research. And a lot of her theories, I'm sure, coming out of her research are quite complex. But she uses her platform to share her data in such a simple and straightforward way. And she tells these stories about this data to paint a picture for her audience and help them, in her case, lead a more authentic, more, a life full of vulnerability and free of shame. That's a lot of what she talks about. And so for my part, I do something similar. I collect a lot of consumer data. And that means that on one side, I am analytical, yes, but anyone who knows me would say Rachel's not a data analyst. A data analyst is somebody who's kind of a data geek, who sort of geeks out at the actual numbers. I'm not that interested in the numbers per se. What I'm interested in is the power of that data. And that power comes from actioning it. It comes from translating it to a diverse group of stakeholders within an organization. And that kind of power creates meaningful change within that organization with customers, and obviously then will help more shoppers discover the Kinder Way. So that's what I'm after, is really being a translator and interpreter of the data to make it more meaningful and create change.
I love that. So basically, you're the Brene Brown of the vegan and vegan and plant-based business sector.
Yes,
we have our own Brene Brown. Yay!
Oh, thank you. I would be absolutely honored to be ever called anything close to Brene Brown.
Well, there you go. I reckon you are. We've got our own. That's brilliant. That's brilliant.
Well, actually, and before we go on, I could share an example if that would be helpful of how this actually works as a storyteller. So I led a segmentation study many years ago for this multinational retailer, and we had learned a lot about the demographics and attitudes and behaviors of category shoppers, right? So sometimes people think that data only goes out to a marketing group. And of course, that is where we started, right? When we were taking this information on the road, and this was a very highly matrix organization, we did start with marketing, right? And we presented this information, all this data, and it helped to inform a lot of the targeting strategies, a lot of the media planning, the messaging strategies, a lot of that. But then we started taking it on the road. And this is where data storytelling really came in handy, right? Because first we took it to operations and we tried to gear the data in a way that would help the stores and the website be laid out in a way that would be conducive to shoppers' needs, right? So it was a very different interpretation of the same data. And so that was a great sort of outcome, was sort of the stores and the website taking on a new approach based on that data. And then we took the data to the merchants, right? And they're responsible for buying all the goods. So we were, again, using the same data, but telling the story in a way that the merchants could hear it, where they were asking themselves, am I buying the goods that this type of shopper actually needs and wants? So it was, again, sort of flexing the data and telling stories from the data in order to support that very diverse audience.
Brilliant, which ultimately gets more customers and more sales for the businesses.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Great,
that's
fantastic.
The goal. Right.
I love that. Thank you very much for sharing that. So tell us a little about the difference. There's quite a few terms that are in this kind of arena, like market research, consumer intelligence, brand strategy. Can you tell us a little bit, what's the difference between those?
Yeah, so that's a really great question, because I think a lot of people do get confused. I think market research I think of as a tool in my toolkit, right? It's a means to an end, but it's not an end in and of itself. So whether you're talking about massive online surveys or focus groups or very in-depth one-on-one interviews, even in a store or in someone's home, those could all be types of market research. And it does serve a purpose, right? It does illuminate the what people do. And it illuminates somewhat the who they are. And some market research, I think, has gotten kind of a bad rap. It can be somewhat uninspiring, right? It can be price prohibitive, and it can also take a lot of time to complete. So I think, there is a paradigm shift happening, and I want to be part of that. So as far as market research goes, again, it's an important tool in my toolkit, but I see the opportunity with market research as being quick turn, high impact, low cost. That's what I'm about where it comes to market research. That's what I like to do. But then, I think the difference between a market researcher and a consumer insights person or consumer intelligence expert is that the consumer insights person can take that market research and take it out of that kind of dusty binder on the shelf, take all the data out, right, as we're just talking about, and really ask the whys and the hows. Why does this really matter? And again, why does it matter to each group of these stakeholders? And how is it going to make a difference to our bottom line? And so that's again what I've aimed for in my career, is to take those basic research findings and then turn them into implications for the business and the brand that will actually promote growth. But I think, then the third level up that you just asked about was brand strategist, right? Or brand strategy. And a brand strategist, a really good brand strategist, is someone that has honed this skill over years and has the capability to take lots of different disparate data sources, right? So that could be everything from feedback from Facebook to a huge segmentation study and everything in between. It could be anything and everything that a customer is telling you. I've gotten great feedback even just from the call center, customer service feedback. That's terrific feedback too. And then taking all of those disparate sources and weaving them together into stories, as we're talking about, and then synthesizing those insights into what really becomes a holistic 360 growth strategy or multiple growth strategies for the brand. And that just gets super exciting, because that's really beyond marketing, like we're talking about, that a brand strategist has the ability to really impact multiple functions within an organization, work cross-functionally, work cross-divisionally, and really be seeking to impact the business goals, not just the marketing plans and strategies. So it's a much bigger ambition and vision, and so that's what I've aspired to in my career, and where I feel I've done some really great work.
I love that. Thank you for explaining that, because I think that is important,
Yeah.
because sometimes with these terms, as I say, people can think, well, are they the same? What exactly are they? So I think that's a really clear, simple explanation, which I think is
Mm-hmm.
fantastic. Now, a
Thanks.
lot of brands, they tend to focus on the sales data, the
Yeah.
figures, the numbers, like you mentioned, or sometimes they might, go, oh, we really must refine our ingredients, and we, put a lot of attention on the packaging. And obviously those things are important. We're not downplaying them. But I believe what you're saying is we need to go further than that, or brands need to go further than that. So can you just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I know you and I talked a little bit about that. So I'll break it into two parts, Katrina. First, I'll talk a little bit about focusing on packaging and ingredients, and then I'll talk about the sales data. So it does make sense that many vegan and plant-based brands, particularly in the early stages, are really focused on product development. That really makes a ton of sense, because that is their proof of concept. They have to make sure that the product is successful once it's out there in the marketplace. But that's just it. Products are not static items on a shelf, right? They're part of this dynamic marketplace. And I think as I've talked to folks in these companies, I've recognized that a lot too often they're looking at their product in a vacuum and not as part of all of the dynamic interworkings of a marketplace. So they might forget that the success of their product has to do with the macro conditions. So it could have to do with consumer confidence or discretionary income of their customer, right? Or it could have everything to do with the category implications, which are also quite dynamic. So new entrants into the category, what does their competitive set look like today versus, next month? And then most importantly, they really forget about the fact that their brand is always in relationship with their shopper, right? So it's not sitting alone. It's always, you can perfect that product all day long, but who are you perfecting it for? The most successful brands are not just products. The products have actually have grown into brands because those brands started thinking like a shopper, right? And I think that's what the bottom line is that if you can really put your finger on who is buying my product and what really truly do they want, and if you can truly answer the question, will it matter if I change my ingredients? What does my packaging need to be if it doesn't matter at all? If you can start to answer those questions and then move quickly beyond those functional benefits and start talking about other aspects of your brand, then you've really gone from product optimization to full out brand building. And that's where a lot of the magic happens. That's where we think of all the big brands out there, the Nikes and the Starbucks and all of those that we can start to emulate. That's where we want to grow these brands. That should be the vision.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and I think that's why, to answer the other part of your question about sales data, that it's just not enough, and so many plant-based food brands that I've spoken to, they're investing in this grocery, SPINS data or Nielsen data. And it is a great validation that the product is selling. But I often say that sales data is like looking in a rear view mirror.
Uh-huh.
And do you know what I mean by that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's sort of, how can you possibly figure out from sales data all the dynamics of the of who's buying your product, but also how can you possibly be predictive from that sales data? You can't possibly know what's next, right? How do
Right.
you actually emerge from who you are today in your product sales to who you want to be tomorrow? How could it possibly inform? Do you launch, new categories in the same, new products in the same category, or do you launch in new categories? Or do you improve your product, and why? So it can't really answer any of those really deeper questions. So, I do think sales data has its place and it's important, but it's really not the end of the story. It can only kind of give you that top line view, that validation that things are working okay. And then
Yeah.
you really have to just dig in and ask yourself, how can I continue this growth trajectory? And that often requires further investigation into shoppers and some
Got
shopper
it.
insights.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
love what you said about think like a shopper, because I think it's important
Yeah.
for business owners to put different hats on. It's similar for when if I'm doing PR consulting or teaching someone how to do their own PR. One of the key things I say to them is you've got to think like a journalist. So you've got to kind of put
Hmm.
yourself in that different position, and that reminded me of that. You've got to think like a shopper. So I think that's really great.
Yeah.
Now you touched on some of these concepts and a couple of other new ones, or ones that I hadn't heard of, called favorability and permissibility, which are processes that the consumer goes through when they're in the shop, deciding which products to take off the shelf and put
Hmm.
in their cart. And you talked about these in your first debut article on Vegconomist, which we can link to on the show notes page. And you talk about how Big Meat is using these concepts to get customers, to buy their products. So can you talk a little bit about these? Just explain what they are and why it's important for vegan and plant-based brands to take them into account.
Yeah, absolutely. I had so much fun writing this article for Vegconomist because it was inspired by a report I didn't actually expect to find. It was a report called "The Power of Meat," available on the Food Marketing Institute website. And as you mentioned, the report was basically highlighting a couple of these strategies that the meat industry is using, and they were referred to as favorability and permissibility. So what my article sought to do was to give vegan and plant-based brands some ideas for evaluating and increasing their own favorability and permissibility in order to beat big meat, in order to win the game. So, favorability, if we look at what that means, it's really about how much shoppers like a product, but also how much they favor it over the competition, right? So, as we just talked about, this could start with some of the functional benefits, like, the ingredients and the quality of those. It could, maybe it's the packaging, it could be the price point, things like that. Those are important. But I think we also have to realize that a large percentage of the shoppers are also going to be comparing the plant-based or vegan product with the animal-based alternative, right? They might be omnivores and flexitarians. And so how does your product stack up with one of those animal-based alternatives? And how does the favorability then, measure up? How much do people like you? And I think what's important about that is, and what I point out in the article, is that Big Meat has gotten pretty crafty with the way that they're serving up things that we would naturally take for granted in the vegan space. Things like, humane treatment of animals, or healthy and, healthier, all the health claims you could possibly want. Big Meat is trying to claim all the same things. And so even sustainability, they've tried to make their packaging as sustainable as possible. So now that shopper is getting pretty confused about which one that he or she likes better, when you're really comparing to the animal-based ones. So that's when the second strategy of permissibility really comes into play. And so what I talk about in the article is that it's really important to consider that second strategy too. So permissibility is more about, how does the shopper allow you into her cart and into her home and into her body, et cetera, right? And this is when you have to think beyond all of those functional product benefits and think about, how does that translate into emotional brand benefits, right? That, I think then you really are asking yourself the question, how will my shopper feel when she buys this product, my product, versus all of those animal-based products? And once you can really crack that code, you're able to fully capitalize on all of those brand benefits in all of your shopper touch points. And that's, again, how you elevate from just being a product on a shelf to
Yeah.
really putting your brand on the map. So that's when it really gets exciting.
Brilliant. I love that. I'm just loving that you're bringing this knowledge, that you've got from all these years into the vegan and plant-based sector. It just makes me very happy and excited. So I'm really loving this. So thank you. And you're
Well, it'll be
explaining
great
it
when I
so
can get, yeah, well, thank you.
accessible. Yeah,
When I can get my book out there, it'll be just, hopefully
absolutely.
just
Looking
a
forward to that.
string of these insights. Yeah.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. No, I love that. Now, can you give us then perhaps an example of your days in the corporate sector? So, how you actually did what you do, like your magic that you weave, like doing all of that, bringing all the data together and, pulling out the stories and then making it a tangible result, giving a tangible result to a business. Is there anything? I mean, look, I think people listening might kind of think, well, you mentioned the multinational apparel and home fashions value retailer. You helped to grow their bottom line by $10 billion. I mean, is there anything? I know obviously you can't share any confidential information. I'm not asking you to do that, but is there anything you can say that can kind of give us an idea of a couple of the outcomes you've achieved?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I got to that multinational retailer that you're speaking of, they were already a $20 billion company, but they didn't have any consumer insights function at all. So my role was to actually start the function. So I built a vision for the function and I built the team, and it was very exciting because I was basically crafting what we're talking about, a very cross-functional, cross-divisional function that would actually aim to create change in what was quite a mature corporation. And, I think part of that then was working across these different divisions. So working in Canada, working in Europe, eventually working with Australia, was working with, across the stores and with e-commerce. And I was really proud of what my team and I were really able to accomplish in the almost 7 years that I was there. So I think, one of the KPIs that we used was comp transactions. And
what does that mean?
And that means that year over year, that the register rang more times than it did the year prior, right? So there were more transactions that year. And so we, by driving more customers into the store, more traffic, we were actually able to see a 5 percentage point gain year over year, which was quite a bit for such a mature corporation as this. We also saw, by working, directly with store operations and helping to inform, again, the layout of the stores and how the stores could be working to meet customers' needs in a better way, that actually delivered a 17 percentage point gain in overall satisfaction.
Wow.
So that was over those 6 years. So it was there were KPIs like that were sort of underneath that 10 billion, and a lot of that had to come from working within the corporation, different functions, different divisions, domestically and internationally, but trying to touch as many groups as we could and deliver as actionable insights as we could along the way.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. I love that. Thank you for breaking that down, because I know people are going to be curious. I know when I first read that about you, I was like, wow, how did she do that? So thank you for explaining that. So this is great. And this is obviously good for brands that, really kind of want to scale. So let's take someone who, say, is an entrepreneur and they want to start a business. So we're going back to sort of someone who's not yet started something. They want to start some kind of vegan and plant-based product type business. Can you talk us through the steps that they would need to take to create a brand that's going to be sustainable, and in what order?
Sure. So I think really the first step, I would say, is to try to get any kind of market data in hand, right? So they'd want to be able to see the landscape. This might be the first opportunity for some shopper insights as well. If they could get their hands on any market trends, the growth of different categories that they would be interested in going into, and then also some of the shopper dynamics for those categories, that would be obviously really helpful as a benchmark. And then the next thing I would say is that they should be seeking some custom data around the shopper demographics for those categories, and then possibly some shopper attitudes and behaviors. So it could be something like, how often are vegans buying those kinds of products versus flexitarians and omnivores, if that kind of data is available. So that could be another opportunity for some shopper insights if they wanted to invest there. And I think also it would be helpful at this point to get some base level awareness of different brands that are already existing in the categories, and also some perceptions of those brands, so that they could know sort of where they wanted to position their brand for success. So that would be important. And then I would say the next step up would be to do all of the product development with a pretty good knowledge of who is the target shopper, right? I think that's really very important. And so as the kind of third entry point for shopper insights, I would say test the concept and then the product with the target shoppers, and ensure that you've got the right taste and texture profile, the flavor, right? That you've got the right health claims, the right price point and willingness to pay, and any other functional benefits that would meet the shopper's needs, and then make any kind of necessary tweaks to the product. So then everything else would be going on at the same time, right? All the production and supply chain, distribution, packaging, that's not really my wheelhouse, but all that would be happening. So then this go-to-market strategy could be done, right? Which I've done before, and I could certainly continue to do more of that. But right before that, I would want, as a kind of entrepreneur in building my business, to understand how to quickly build brand awareness, because the product's obviously only as good as people can know about it and it's being promoted. So I'd want to understand how to build that brand awareness quickly and efficiently with this target audience. And these days there are so many cost-efficient media strategies, as I'm sure you know, right? From mobile and digital and social strategies. So this is not actually a place where I would invest in shopper insights. I would just find a media expert who understands that target audience and those different channels well enough to be able to direct the dollars. So the last step, I would say, in really getting your product sort of like launched, is really to figure out how to message it to the right target shoppers. And that's, I think, the fourth opportunity that I would say for shopper insights, and really even for a brand strategist to come in for a bit, because if you have that brand strategist, you can talk about, okay, I believe in this product, I know all of its functional benefits, but you want to make sure that what you're messaging about the product is not going to fall on deaf ears, right? That you're not just going to, there's so much out there, right? It's just such a cluttered marketplace that you don't want your messaging to be wallpaper, right? You really need it to be compelling and relevant and differentiated from the competition, and to find that unique selling proposition in the marketplace. So all of that is about knowing what's important to your shopper. That's really what creates breakthrough and meaningful advertising that will actually attract eyeballs and create brand awareness.
Yeah, I think that's really important, particularly nowadays, because now that the market is becoming, kind of almost flooded with, plant-based meats, plant-based dairy, whereas, a decade or so, 2 decades ago, whatever, if you brought out a vegan cheese, it would probably, as long as it tasted pretty decent, you'd have customers because there wasn't much choice. But now, there's so many high quality, amazing products coming out that you're right, that you've really got to stand out, not only from the animal-based counterparts, but also from some of the other vegan and plant-based brands that are out as well. That's brilliant. So that's brilliant. So that's for someone who's wanting to start a business. Now, what about an existing vegan or plant-based brand? And I know you've touched on this a little bit with your work that you did with the multinational, but with existing vegan and plant-based brands, they want to scale, but they've reached a bit of a plateau in terms of sales and market share. What can they do to move the needle?
That's really interesting. Yeah, I mean, obviously, there's an opportunity to just take a step back, right, and reevaluate. Am I happy with the products that I'm selling today, right? Because if you're not, obviously you can re-engineer your products and improve them. You can launch products in a different category, and I would say you might need some shopper insights at that point if you're thinking about that. Only because you want to make sure that shoppers will give you permission as a brand to launch in a new category, that it makes sense to them, to be in that new category, and that you are not having them scratch their heads and saying, well, why is that brand there? That doesn't really add up. So I guess that, that could be one approach. But assuming that you are happy with the product that you're selling, I would say there's at least 3 ways that Shopper Insights could help to actually get you unstuck and out of that plateau of sales and actually move forward. So the first one would be building and leveraging your loyalists, right? So you have this group, if you've been out there for a while, that actually really love you, right? So I'd want to encourage their loyalty, and that could happen with an effective loyalty program, of course, which some brands have already done well. So I'd want to look at that. And I'd also want to talk with those loyalists to understand what they love about the brand. In order to make sure that I could echo that out to some of those newer shoppers or some of those less frequent shoppers, right? That can also obviously help you get unstuck. If you're using everything that's great and what people love about you and haloing out to those that don't love you as much, right? And then, obviously you could also look for those loyalists to become advocates for you. So that could be about posting reviews or reposting brand content or even becoming paid influencers for you. All kinds of things to just get them out there and singing your praises. The next way I would say to get out of a plateau, the second way would be make sure that you are targeting shoppers that are actually going to promote brand growth for you. So this is kind of, I could say fishing where the fishing's good, but that wouldn't be a vegan thing to say.
Yeah, so, to come up with a vegan-friendly version of that.
I know, exactly. So, but this could be accomplished with what I was talking before, like a segmentation study of some kind. This kind of segmentation study, for example, could give you not only the demographic profiles of who are the likely shoppers or the current shoppers of your products, but it could also give you some more details on their attitudes and behaviors so that you know how to speak to them more effectively in all of your touch points. And then kind of as a 1-2 punch, I would say the third way that Shopper Insights can get you out of that plateau is to follow up that segmentation study with a customer journey mapping exercise. And what that really is about is how do you intercept your target at all of the different points of their path to purchase? So you'll quickly realize if you start thinking about who is my shopper before she gets to the store, before she's looking at all of the different alternatives and all of that, you'll quickly realize where you know the most and where you might have some learning gaps. And that might give you some indication of where you need to do some additional research of some kind, even if it's sort of a quick hit study of some kind, just to find out how to make sure that you are building that full path to purchase, and understand where you might be, where you might have some pain points and obstacles that you need to course correct for, where people might be falling off. Maybe you do understand a lot about building loyalists and building advocacy, for example, but maybe you realize in that customer journey mapping that you just don't know a lot about how to go from people who are just aware of your product to actually building consideration for your product.
Right.
Maybe you need some more help at what you would call the top end of the marketing funnel. And I think that's where a lot of brands suffer, is kind of in that top or middle end often, is they kind of get stuck. A lot of people might know about them, but they can't convert those people into becoming actual shoppers.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So
No, that's really handy. So what I love about that is it's taking the guesswork out of launching a product or getting people to buy it, because sometimes I think brands just kind of go, oh, there's a space that this market or this category is doing well, we'll launch into it. Or, like you said, they've been running for a while. It's kind of like, well, we're there, we've been there, we're doing all this and that. Why aren't people buying? And I think the work that you're doing seems to take the guesswork out of that, which is what I really love. So you shared some really great insights, which is fantastic. So in terms of, I know you've described kind of the work that you do. I think you've described that really well throughout this interview. Tell us obviously you work with vegan and plant-based brands. Who else do you work with? Because I can see that the type of work you do is going to be applicable to more than one stakeholder. So tell us a little bit about who you work with.
Yeah, absolutely. So I plan on working with at least three types of clients. So one of them is the vegan and plant-based companies out there. That would be a primary part of my business. The second one is more traditional companies or corporations that are entering the vegan space and need some understanding of that customer. Someone who is at least open to buying those vegan and plant-based products. So that would be the second type. And then the third one would be the investment community, investors, ad agencies, nonprofits, others that are maybe interested in this space and learning more about it, and just need that consumer intelligence to dial in order to in order to really make an impact
Yeah.
in that space. Yeah.
Brilliant. Fantastic. Is there anything else you'd like to add? I know we've covered a lot. So is there any final things you want to add, or have we?
I guess, I guess I do want to say again that it doesn't have to be that difficult. Sometimes I think that people look at market research or, all of what's involved in building a brand as being very complicated, very complex. And it's not. It can be very straightforward. It can even be as easy as mining data that you already have. I think some people forget, some companies that I've talked to might forget that they're sitting on some valuable feedback. And if they just have the right resources, whether, existing on their teams, or whether they want to bring someone in to really evaluate what do they know already, it can be a very efficient process. And then all they have to do is maybe fill in a couple of learning gaps, and they've elevated their product by miles into really putting their brand on the map.
Oh, I love it. I love that. So just to wrap up then, as well as on Vegconomist, which you're now a regular contributor, people can read your articles there. And as I mentioned, we'll link to the first one. Where else at the moment? And of course, when your book comes out, we'll share that. But in the meantime, where can people find you if they want to connect with you, if they want to work with you? Where can they find you?
Yeah, I think the best, since I'm in the process of putting together the website, I think, if you go to thekinderway.com, ultimately you'll have lots of information there. Right now, if you go there, you will be directed to LinkedIn and to my profile, or you can go directly to LinkedIn and just plug in The Kinder Way, and that will let you read lots more about me and about The Kinder Way.
Wonderful. Well, we'll be sure to put links to those in the show notes page. It's been such a pleasure speaking with you, Rachel. I think this is just, as I mentioned earlier, I'm just so excited and happy that we've got people like you coming into this sector, bringing in all of that experience, all of that expertise, and using it to help accelerate the growth of the vegan and plant-based sector. So I absolutely love that. Thank you so much for your time. It's been great speaking with you. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you, Katrina. I really appreciate the opportunity to be with you today. Thanks so much.